The massive alien warship drifted through space, its hull scarred and blackened from countless battles. On the bridge, Admiral Kethmeyer stared at the holographic display floating before him. Red dots covered the star map like a disease, each one representing a Vexkari fleet that had destroyed another world. His forearms trembled as he counted the losses. 37 colonies gone in the past month. Millions of beings consumed by the hungry swarm that ate everything in its path. The Galactic Coalition, once proud rulers of half the galaxy, now ran from system to system like frightened children. "Sir, we have another report," said Communications Officer Velinara, her blue skin pale with fear. She floated near her station, her tentacles dancing over the controls with practiced ease. "The mining worlds near Altair, they're gone. All of them." Kethmera closed his 3 eyes and felt his heart sink. The Altair system had been home to 12 billion souls just yesterday. Now it was nothing but empty space and floating debris. The Vexkari had consumed every living thing, every building, every scrap of metal. They turned it all into more ships, more soldiers, more death. "How many ships do we have left?" he asked his tactical officer. 215 vessels. "Across all fleets, sir. It's maybe 300 if we count the damaged ones." The young officer's voice cracked with exhaustion. They'd been fighting for 8 months without rest, jumping from system to system, ahead of the advancing horror. Kethmera looked around his bridge at the tired faces of his crew. These were the best officers in the Coalition, beings from dozens of different worlds who had trained their entire lives for war. Now they looked defeated, broken by an enemy that could not be reasoned with or stopped. The Vexkari were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. They were not conquerors who wanted territory or resources. They were devourers who consumed entire worlds and turned the biomass into more of themselves. Every battle made them stronger, while making the Coalition weaker. Sir Velinara called. "Out again. We're receiving surrender offers from the Centauri Defense Fleet. Admiral Zethara says his forces can't hold the line anymore." The news hit the bridge like a physical blow. The Centauri fleet was the Coalition's strongest military force, equipped with the most advanced weapons and crewed by the most experienced warriors. If they were giving up, what hope did anyone else have? Kethmera walked to the great window that looked out into space. In the distance, he could see other Coalition ships running their emergency repairs. Crews worked desperately to fix hull breaches and replace damaged weapons before the next attack came. They all knew it was hopeless, but they kept working anyway. "Send a message to all remaining fleets," he said finally. "Tell them to fall back to the Kepler 442 system. We'll make our last stand there." His officers exchanged worried looks. Kepler's system was deep in Coalition space, far from the frontier worlds where the war had started. If they were retreating that far, it meant they had lost everything else. "Sir," his tactical officer said quietly, "what about the emergency protocols? Should we activate the Omega Read authorization?" Kethmera had hoped it would not come to this. Omega Red was the Coalition's final desperate measure, a call for help sent to every corner of known space. It was an admission that they could no longer protect themselves, that they needed anyone willing to fight by their side. "Do it," he ordered. "Send the message on all frequencies, in all languages. Ask for military assistance from any species capable of combat operations. Tell them we're facing extinction." Velinara's tentacles flew over her controls as she prepared the transmission. The message would take months to reach the outer edges of the galaxy, and there was no guarantee anyone would answer. Most species had their own problems to worry about. The emergency broadcast went out into the void. A desperate cry from a dying civilization traveled through hyperspace relays and quantum communication networks, reaching worlds that had never heard of the Vexkari threat. Far away, on a small blue planet orbiting a yellow star, the message arrived at a military monitoring station. Lieutenant Commander Lee Minho was working the night shift when his computers detected the alien transmission. He had never seen anything like it before. The message was clearly a distress call, but it came from species he had never heard of. The universal translator struggled with some of the words, but the meaning was clear. Somewhere in space, beings were fighting for their lives against an enemy that wanted to eat them all. Minho immediately contacted his superiors at Earth Defense Command. Within hours, the message reached the highest levels of human military leadership. Fleet Admiral Park Sojin read the transmission 3 times before making her decision. "These aliens need help," she told her staff. "Humanity has never turned its back on those fighting for survival. Prepare the 3rd battle. Group for immediate deployment." Captain Kim Dae-yoon received her orders while her ship was in dry dock for routine maintenance. The Inchin was one of Earth's newest dreadnoughts, built for long-range operations and equipped with humanity's most advanced weapons. "How long until we can launch?" she asked her chief engineer. "Give us 6 hours to finish the repairs, Captain." "Where are we going?" Kim looked at the star chart showing the location of the distress call. It was farther from Earth than any human had ever traveled. Deep in unknown space where alien civilizations fought wars beyond imagination. "We're going to save some people," she said simply. The Coalition staging area around Kepler 442 looked like a graveyard of broken dreams. Hundreds of damaged alien ships floated in careful formations, their crews working desperately to repair hull breaches and replace burned-out weapon systems. The air inside every vessel carried the smell of fear and defeat. Admiral Mol Kethmera stood on the observation deck of his flagship, watching repair crews scurry across the hulls of nearby vessels like insects. His 3 eyes tracked the movement of welding torches and cargo shuttles, carrying replacement parts that would never be enough to make a real difference. "Sir, we have 3 unknown contacts dropping out of FTL," announced his sensor operator. The young officer's voice carried a note of hope that Kethmera had not heard in months. The admiral rushed to his command center and studied the tactical display. 3 ships materialized from hyperspace, their design unlike anything in the Coalition database. They were angular and brutal-looking, with thick armor plating and weapon ports that seemed to cover every surface. "Only 3 ships?" muttered his tactical officer. "I was hoping for more." Kethmera felt his heart sink again. After sending desperate calls across the galaxy for months, only 3 vessels had answered. These newcomers would be slaughtered. Within minutes of meeting the Vexkari swarm, the lead ship broadcast a message on standard communication frequencies. "Coalition fleet, this is Captain Kim of the Earth Defense Force. We received your distress call. We are here to help." The voice was female and confident, speaking through a universal translator that made her words sound crisp and clear. Kethmera had never heard of Earth or humans, but any help was welcome at this point. "Captain Kim, this is Admiral Kethmera. We appreciate your response, but I must warn you that our enemy is extremely dangerous. Perhaps you should consider evacuating your people instead of fighting." There was a pause before the human captain responded. "Admiral, my people did not travel across the galaxy to run away. We came here to fight." Within an hour, a small group of humans transported aboard the Coalition flagship. Kethmera waited in his main briefing room, surrounded by his senior officers from a dozen different species. When the transport beam activated, 5 figures materialized in the center of the room. The humans were smaller than most Coalition species, but they moved with a confidence that filled the space around them. Their leader was a woman with dark hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in every detail of the room instantly. She wore a uniform that looked practical rather than decorative. "I am Captain Kim Dae-yoon," she said, extending her hand in what appeared to be a greeting gesture. "This is Major Choi Jinwoo, our tactical officer. Lieutenant Park Young-soo handles engineering. Dr. Han Soo-jin is our medical officer. Sergeant Lee Taemin represents our marine forces." The introductions were polite, but Kethmera noticed how each human carried themselves like a predator ready to strike. Even their doctor had the bearing of someone who had seen combat. It was unsettling, in a way he could not explain. "Please, sit down," Kethmera gestured to chairs around the holographic table. "Let me show you what we are facing." The briefing began with a display of Vexkari positions throughout the sector. Red markers showed enemy fleet concentrations, while blue dots represented the last Coalition strongholds. The tactical situation looked hopeless to any reasonable military mind. Our standard procedure is to evacuate civilian populations before the enemy arrives, explained Commander Yelenoth. The Coalition's chief tactical officer, we establish defensive positions at maximum range and conduct fighting withdrawals to preserve our forces. Major Choi leaned forward and studied the display. What about offensive operations? Striking at their supply lines or command structures? Room fell silent. Several Coalition officers looked at each other with confusion. Their translator units sparked and hummed as they tried to process concepts that did not exist in their military doctrine. Offensive operations against the Vexkari would be suicide, Kethmera explained patiently. They outnumber us 52. One, in every ship we lose, makes them stronger. Our only hope is to delay them long enough for our civilians to escape. Captain Kim tilted her head slightly. Admiral, where we come from, we have a saying, the best defense is a good offense. You cannot win a war by only running away. Lieutenant Park casually mentioned that human ships routinely operated in radiation fields that would cook most organic life within minutes. Dr. Han discussed treating battlefield, injuries that would instantly kill every other species in the Coalition. The humans talked about these things as if they were normal, everyday concerns. Wait, interrupted Science Officer Telmara, her feathers ruffling with alarm. You fight in hard radiation? How is that possible? Our home planet has a fairly active magnetic field, Park explained with a shrug. Solar radiation, cosmic particles, nuclear fallout from weapons testing. You learn to deal with it, or you die. Sergeant Lee described something called boarding operations, where human soldiers would attack enemy ships by cutting through their hulls and fighting inside the vessels during battle. He spoke about combat in zero-gravity and toxic atmospheres, as if it were a routine training exercise. The Coalition officers listened with growing horror as they realized these newcomers came from what xenobiologists called a death world. Earth was apparently so dangerous that only the most lethal species could survive there. The humans were not just allies. They were apex predators from a planet that tried to kill everything on it. How many ships can Earth send? Kethmera asked. Quietly, as many as needed. Captain Kim replied without hesitation. Admiral, my government has authorized unlimited military support for your cause. We do not abandon people who fight for their survival. For the first time in months, Kethmera felt something that might have been hope. The first battle came 3 days later in the Vega system, where a Coalition mining fleet was trapped by advancing Vexkari forces. Admiral Kethmera watched his tactical display with growing dread as dozens of enemy bioships swarmed toward the helpless civilian vessels. The mining ships were huge but slow, carrying millions of tons of raw materials. And thousands of workers from 12 different species, they had no weapons, no shields, and no chance of escape. The Vexkari would consume them all within hours. All Coalition units, execute emergency withdrawal pattern, Kethmera ordered over the communication system. Save what ships you can. We cannot afford to lose our remaining forces. His words carried the bitter taste of defeat. This was how every battle had gone for 8 months. The Coalition would arrive to help, realize they were outnumbered, and retreat while innocent people died. It was the only way to preserve their forces for the next hopeless fight. Negative, Admiral, Captain Kim's voice cut through the static. This is where we make our stand. All human units move to attack formation, weapons free. Kethmera stared at his display in disbelief. The 3 human ships were accelerating directly toward the Vexkari swarm, not away from it. They were heading straight into the middle of 40 enemy vessels with what appeared to be a suicide charge. Captain Kim, you were outnumbered 14. 2-1, he called out desperately. This is madness. Pull back immediately. Admiral, my people have been outnumbered before, came the calm reply. We know how to handle it. The human dreadnoughts opened fire while still at extreme range, their weapons cutting through space with deadly precision. The first Vexkari bioship exploded in a ball of green flame, its living hull unable to withstand the concentrated firepower. Then the second one died, and the third Major Choi coordinated the attack from the Inchen's combat center. His voice steady and professional, as he called out targets. Focus fire on the command nodes. Give me maximum power to forward weapons. Taman, prep your Marines for boarding operations. Boarding operations. Kethmara's translator struggled with the concept. In the middle of a space battle, Sergeant Lee Taman was already suiting up in the Inchin's Marine Bay, checking his weapons and equipment with practiced efficiency. Around him, 200 human Marines prepared for something that no other species in the galaxy would attempt. Sir, boarding operations work best when the enemy is busy fighting, Lee explained over the comm system. They do not expect visitors during a battle. Small assault pods launch from the human ships, each one carrying a squad of Marines wearing armor designed to survive in the vacuum of space. The pods looked like metal coffins as they streaked toward the enemy bioships, dodging plasma fire and debris from the ongoing battle. Lieutenant Park's engineering teams had modified the assault. Pods with shaped charges that could punch through Vexkari hull material. The pods struck their targets like bullets, boring deep into the living ships before releasing their deadly cargo. The Marines fought inside the enemy vessels while the space battle raged outside. They moved through corridors filled with toxic atmosphere and zero gravity, using weapons that would have been impossible for most Coalition species to carry. The Vexkari defenders were twice the size of humans, with claws that could tear through steel. They had never faced opponents who seemed to enjoy close combat. Dr. Han Soo-jin established a field medical station on a captured bioship, treating wounded Marines in conditions that would kill most Coalition medics. She worked in an environment filled with alien atmosphere and floating debris, her movements sure and confident despite the chaos around her. "How are you treating patients in that environment?" asked Dr. Yalkari, the Coalition's chief medical officer, his voice filled with amazement. "The atmospheric mixture alone should be lethal. We have good filters in our suits," Han replied, while working on a Marine who had taken a claw through his chest. "And humans are pretty hard to kill." The tide of battle turned when Sergeant Lee's Marines captured a Vexkari command bioship. Fighting hand-to-hand against creatures that outweighed them 3-1, the humans used tactics that seemed impossible. They fought in zero gravity, used explosive weapons in enclosed spaces, and continued attacking even after taking injuries that should have been fatal. The human assault was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Instead of the careful, methodical warfare preferred by Coalition forces, the humans fought with controlled violence. They turned the Vexkari's own aggression against them, using their enemy's hunger for combat as a weapon. When the last enemy bioship exploded, the human fleet regrouped near the rescued mining vessels. All 3 dreadnoughts showed damage that would have destroyed Coalition ships, but they continued operating as if nothing had happened. Holes in their hulls were sealed with emergency patches, and their crews worked calmly to repair battle damage. "Casualty report," Captain Kim requested over the communication system. 17 wounded, 3 serious, reported Dr. Han. No fatalities. Admiral Kethmara stared at his tactical display in shock. In 4 hours of combat, these humans had destroyed an entire Vexkari fleet without losing a single ship or crew member. They had accomplished what the Coalition had been unable to do in 8 months of warfare. Admiral Captain Kim's voice came through the comm system. "We are ready. For the next engagement? Where do you need us?" For the first time since the war began, Kethmara smiled. The galaxy had just learned that there were worse things than the Vexkari. There were the beings who hunted them for sport. News of the human victory at Vega spread through Coalition space faster than their fastest ships could travel. Within days, every remaining military commander knew that 3 unknown vessels had destroyed an entire Vexkari fleet. Within weeks, more human ships began arriving from the distant world called Earth. Fleet Admiral Park Seo-jin established her command aboard the massive carrier Sol, ship so large it could dock smaller vessels inside its hull. Her staff included veterans who had fought in wars across their home planet, bringing tactics and strategies that the galaxy had never seen before. Admiral Kethmara met with Park aboard her flagship. Walking through corridors filled with human Marines who moved with the easy confidence of natural predators, the ship itself felt different. From Coalition vessels, Everything was built for function, rather than comfort, designed by people who expected to fight for their lives. "Admiral Park, I must ask," Kethmera said as they entered her command center. "How many ships can Earth provide?" Park studied the galactic map floating above her tactical table. Red markers still showed Vexkari positions across dozens of star systems, but now blue markers represented growing human fleets. "As many as needed, Admiral. My government has declared total war against the Vexkari. We will not stop until they are defeated." The humans brought new concepts that changed everything about galactic warfare. Captain Ojasun led what he called deep strike missions, sending small fleets far behind enemy lines to attack Vexkari staging areas. His ships fought running battles against impossible odds, somehow always managing to escape after causing massive damage. "How do you survive these missions?" asked Coalition Commander Telmara during a strategy briefing. "Your casualty rate should be 100%. O smiled grimly. "My crews volunteered for these missions. We pick people who are too stubborn. To die and to mean to quit works pretty well so far." The psychological impact on the Vexkari was devastating. For millions of years they had been the ultimate predators, consuming everything in their path without resistance. Now they faced an enemy that seemed to thrive on violence, that grew stronger when pressed, treated hopeless situations as challenges to overcome. Dr. Song Hai-jin revolutionized coalition medical care by establishing trauma centers that could save species from wounds previously considered fatal. Her techniques came from treating human soldiers who routinely survived injuries that would kill anyone else in the galaxy. "Your medical procedures violate every safety standard we have," admitted Dr. Yelkari as he watched Song operate on a wounded coalition pilot. "How do you make it work?" "Humans are built to survive damage," Song explained while working. "Our bones are dense, our blood clots quickly, and our organs can function even when badly injured. We just assume everyone else can do the same." Lieutenant Colonel Bae Seung-ho led special operations teams deep into Vexkari territory not to gather intelligence, but to kill enemy commanders and sabotage critical installations. His soldiers operated alone for months, living off captured supplies and improvised equipment. The Special Forces teams infiltrated Vexkari command ships during the battle, fighting through corridors filled with defending creatures while explosions shook the vessels around them. They used weapons that other species considered too dangerous to carry, including nuclear charges that they would detonate by hand if necessary. "Your people fight like they want to die," observed Coalition Intelligence Officer Meltara during Meltara species considered too dangerous to carry, including nuclear charges that Penkane came including nuclear charges that they would detonate by hand. If Kane came Meltara saw, "Your people fight like they want to, Walt." I complayed waltz. A briefing with Bay's team, Sergeant Major Kim Hae-onwoo, one of Bay's veterans, laughed. "Ma'am, we fight like we want to live. The difference is we're willing to do whatever it takes." Coalition morale improved dramatically as human-led offensives reclaimed system after system. The aliens watched in amazement as their new allies accomplished impossible victories with casual confidence. Treating miraculous successes as routine operations, the humans introduced combined arms, tactics that used every available weapon simultaneously. They coordinated fleet actions with special forces operations and orbital bombardments, creating multi-layered attacks that overwhelmed Vexkari defenses. Major General Lee Sung-ho commanded ground operations on liberated worlds, leading armies. That included both human forces and coalition troops who had learned to fight like humans. His soldiers advanced into enemy-held territory instead of defending prepared positions, taking the fight directly to the Vexkari. "We don't fight to hold ground," he explained to coalition officers. "We fight to kill the enemy. If you kill enough of them, the ground takes care of itself." The Vexkari began showing signs of something they had never experienced before: fear. Their attacks became less coordinated, their advance slowed. Some fleets began retreating when they detected human vessels in a system. Captain Yoon Min-young's destroyer squadron specialized in what humans called hunter-killer operations. They would track individual Vexcurry fleets across multiple star systems, harassing them constantly until the enemy ships were too damaged to fight effectively. "They're afraid of us now," Yoon reported during a fleet conference. "The Vexcari used to attack everything they saw. Now they run when they detect our ships." Admiral Kethmera found himself commanding not a desperate defense, but an unstoppable offensive. Humans had not just joined the coalition. They had transformed it into something the galaxy had never seen before. An army of predators more dangerous than the monsters they hunted. Fleet. Admiral Park studied the latest battle reports with satisfaction. In 6 months, human forces had pushed the Vexcari back across 50 star systems. The enemy that had seemed unstoppable was now in full retreat. "Admiral," her aide reported, "intelligence suggests the Vexcari are concentrating all remaining forces around their home system. They appear to be preparing for a final battle." Park smiled coldly. "Then we'll give them one." The final battle began with the largest space fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Over 300 coalition vessels surrounded the Vexcari home system, while massive orbital defense platforms prepared to destroy anything that came within range. The enemy had gathered every remaining bioship around their birth world, creating a swarm of over 1,000 vessels. Fleet Admiral Park Sojin stood on the bridge of her flagship Seoul, studying tactical displays that showed impossible odds. Even with all the human reinforcements, they were still outnumbered 3-1. The Vexcari home system was protected by weapons that could destroy entire fleets, and the enemy fought with the desperation of a species facing extinction. All human vessels. "This is Admiral Park," she announced across the fleet communication system. "Today we finish what they started. Today we show the galaxy what happens when you threaten innocent people. All ships advance to attack positions." The human assault began with a coordinated strike that stunned both allies and enemies. Instead of the careful approach preferred by coalition forces, the humans charged directly into the enemy formation. Captain Kim Dayoon's Incheon led the attack, her ship taking damage that would have destroyed any other vessel while continuing to fight. The bridge shook violently as Vexcari plasma bolts hammered the hull. Emergency lights flickered, and the smell of burning electronics filled the air. Kim's crew worked with mechanical precision, maintaining weapons and shields, while hull breaches vented atmosphere around them. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Lieutenant Park Young-soo from his engineering station. "Emergency teams are sealing it now." "Weapon status?" Kim asked, while studying the tactical display. "Forward batteries at 60%, replied Major Choi Jinwoo. "We can keep firing." The human fleet punched through the outer defenses, using tactics that violated every rule of space warfare. They accepted damage that would have forced coalition ships to retreat, absorbed casualties that other species could not survive, and continued attacking when any reasonable force would have withdrawn. Major General Lee Song-ho coordinated the assault on the orbital platforms from his command ship. His Marines launched from vessels already damaged beyond most species' ability to survive, their assault pods threading through defensive fire that turned space into a field of death. "Third wave away," he reported to Admiral Park. Estimated arrival at Platform 7 in 4 minutes. The assault pods were little more than armored boxes with engines, carrying Marines who would fight inside enemy installations while the space battle raged outside. Each pod was a potential coffin, but the humans treated them as routine transportation. Colonel Nam Ho-seok led the attack on the largest orbital platform, fighting through corridors filled with toxic atmosphere and defending creatures the size of small buildings. His special forces used explosives, plasma weapons, and when necessary, improvised devices crafted from alien technology. "Platform defenses are down," he reported, while his team fought through the command center. "We have control of the main weapon systems." Dr. Song Haijin established forward medical stations inside captured Vexcari installations, treating wounded humans and coalition allies while the structures shook from ongoing explosions. Her medics worked in conditions that violated every safety protocol in galactic medicine, yet somehow kept everyone alive. The breakthrough came when Sergeant Major Lee Tame's Marine platoon penetrated the Vexcari command complex on the home. world's surface. They had fought their way through orbital defenses, survived a combat landing on a hostile planet, now moved through underground tunnels toward the enemy leadership. The Vexkari command center was a nightmare of organic architecture and living walls that pulsed with alien life. The enemy commanders were massive creatures that had never faced physical combat, protected by warrior forms that stood 3 meters tall and wielded claws that could cut through steel. Lee's Marines fought hand-to-hand against opponents that outweighed them by hundreds of kilograms. They used plasma weapons, explosive charges, and close combat techniques that seemed impossible against such large enemies. The humans moved like predators, using speed and intelligence to overcome brute strength. Target the big one in the center? Lee called out to his squad while dodging razor-sharp claws. That's their command node. The final Vexkari leader fell to concentrated plasma fire, its death screams echoing through the organic corridors. With the command structure destroyed, the hive mind species lost coordination. Their remaining forces either surrendered or fled to unknown regions of space. When the battle ended, the human fleets regrouped around the conquered world. Nearly every ship showed damage that should have destroyed them, yet they continued operating, as if nothing had happened. The cost had been terrible, but the war was over. Admiral Kethmara met with Fleet Admiral Park aboard the Soul after the victory. The Coalition commander looked exhausted but relieved, while the human admiral appeared ready to fight another battle if necessary. "How do we thank you for what you have done?" Kethmara asked. "You don't need to thank us," Park replied. "We did what anyone should do when innocent people are threatened." 6 months later, the formal ceremony inducting humanity into the Galactic Coalition took place on the neutral world of Sanctuary. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered to witness the historic event. Kethmara addressed the assembled delegates, his voice carrying across the vast amphitheater. "We asked for help against an enemy we could not defeat. What we received were warriors from a world so dangerous that they consider warfare a reasonable career choice. Today we welcome humanity as full members of our coalition." Fleet Admiral Park accepted the charter on behalf of Earth, her dress uniform bearing decorations from battles across the galaxy. Behind her stood the officers and crew who had transformed a desperate defense into total victory. As the ceremony concluded, representatives approached the human delegation with offers of alliance and trade agreements. Others asked quietly about Earth's location and defenses, just in case humanity ever decided they preferred conquest to cooperation. The galaxy had learned to fear many things over the millennia. Now they understood there was something worse than any monster from the darkness. There were the ones who hunted monsters for sport.